to start with the expectation that there will be resistance, there will be pushback because status quo is going to be disturbed. People will be pushed out of comfort zone. Existing means ways of working will be disrupted.
Hello and welcome to the new episode of Superlawyer. Today, we have with us an esteemed fellow and program director at DAKSH, Surya Prakash BS, sir. Welcome, sir, and thank you for agreeing to meet with us and give this particular interview to Superlawyer YouTube channel.
Thank you so much, Divya ji. Happy to be part of it. Looking forward to this conversation to share my journey.
Let me begin with Sir's journey about DAKSH, which is a civil society organization that undertakes research and activities to promote accountability and better governance in India, which almost all of us try and find in the society. Now, I would like to begin this interview with a very small question, sir. When did you decide to become a lawyer? Why did you decide to become a lawyer after having such an amazing career of a CA since the year 2000?
So I was a chartered accountant. I was working in the IT industry in corporate side. And somewhere after I started getting into tax litigation, handling tax matters for these companies, I realized the importance of having law knowledge and not just tax knowledge. Law is such a wide area that I feel everyone should have it. It's like arithmetic, it's like reading, writing. The modern society demands that law should also be made a necessary topic for all of us to be aware in some form or the other. And more so when you're handling such a complex topic like taxation, it is not for everybody. It's a super technical topic. But when it is applied and it is administered by officials, it is administered and adjudicated upon by generalists, as judges or lawyers, it takes its own life. And then I realized that you need to be able to speak the language of these other community. It was a very intellectual response that made me choose to take up law course, to say, yeah, there's something in the other side of the river. Let me explore and figure out how much more enjoyable it would be.
So, given that fact, you have transitioned from being a CA, an absolutely successful career, and then to law. And you have also been the program director at DAKSH. You have led many initiatives like Rule of Law project and setting it up in the Law and Technology department at IT Delhi. How do you see these projects align with your vision for the future of India's legal landscape? What are your plans regarding that?
So I'm going to take a few minutes. So please allow me some time because this is a very important question that many of us do not realize the gravity of the situation. As India matures, and as the economy grows to become from a middle income to a high income society, what we need are strong institutions. The society it is becoming from a agricultural income to a industrial income to a technological income based society. In this transition, there are many aspects of our society that are causing friction. Personal lives are getting disrupted. People are getting uprooted due to migration, environment, and there is always the clash between the haves and the have nots. In this journey of the nation, I think what will hold us all together, apart from each of us individually becoming enlightened and aware of our motivations, are also public institutions, governance institutions that can withstand these rise and fall of the tides of time and the pulls and pressures of the politics of the street. How do you keep a distance? How do you maintain your own self? With that objective, Rule of Law project at DAKSH was started by a group of people, Harish Narsappa, now senior advocate, Karnataka High Court, and Kishore Mandyam, one of the active members of the team. I happened to join that program. I happened to join that project in 2015. So as we started working from there, we realized that while systemic change is important, while institutions are important, what is required is to also engage with the citizens on the street. What do they want? What are their expectations? What do they feel about these institutions? So our perspective has always been systemic change, institutional engagement, but from the citizens' perspective. And that has what has stood for us all these years. we do not refuse any perspective, whether it is sociological, whether it is economic, whether it is systems thinking, whether it is technology. All of these are aids that we should use appropriately in making these change possible. One advantage of technology is that it allows for scale. It overcomes your geographical, the physical limitations, and it becomes very attractive tool. It has to be used carefully, it has to be used appropriately, and that is always a challenge. But in that direction, when we were thinking on how to use technology and analytics, an opportunity came for us to partner with IIT Delhi, and that is how the Center for IIT Delhi was set up. Much more to do with many other institutions, looking forward to many more collaborations and impactful engagements.
So, sir, given your background, you have also co-edited the book called Technology and Analysis for Law and Justice. How do you see technology and analytics playing a role in improving access to justice and enhancing legal outcomes? And I would like to also add to this, how do you foresee it is going to change our legal justice system? Problem is, we have to first understand how technology is infiltrating our lives as well. We would love to hear your views.
I think the question is answered by the fact that we are talking to each other in different cities and talking so seamlessly, right? You have your answer right there. Technology has integrated so well with our lives that sometimes you feel too well for comfort. But the fact that technology is so ingrained in our day-to-day functioning, but is somewhat seen to be not at home in the legal space, law and justice space, is the bridge that needs to be crossed. Technology can make a big difference to all aspects of law and justice, whether it is access to law, whether it is access to information about your rights, whether it is finding out who the appropriate agency for you is. Is it a paralegal? Is it a law firm? Is it a lawyer? Is it an NGO that can help you? All of those people who can support you in a citizen's journey from being aware of the rights to enforcing those rights. I think that is the foremost thing. Everything else has to be seen to be assisting the citizen in that process. Whether they are law firms that have now realized in a big way the use of AI and databases, etc., or courts that are now waking up and integrating with the use of technology. It is also true that the courts are fairly downstream, if you may see it that way. You have a Zomato order, hypothetically, if it has to go to a court, it is so much downstream in the transaction process. So courts will always be in a reaction mode to adopting technology, but it needs to be done sooner rather than later. India is at an advantage. It is very analogous to how mobile penetration in India scaled up much faster than some of the countries in the West, because the landlines had not penetrated. Very similarly, because many courts in our country do not even have desktops. So moving to the next generation of technology, whether it is video conferencing, whether it is text to speech, text features, all of this becomes so much more possible because the status quo is only zero. I don't have to market anymore the impact of technology. Lawyers who are fully clued into the needs of citizens are aware of it. They're on WhatsApp. People expect updates on WhatsApp. People expect QR codes to make payments. All of these are becoming something that is a part and parcel of our life. It will just flow down into the court systems in the days to come. I have no doubt about it. The challenge for us is to make sure that it is done in a very structured manner so that the citizen is kept at the center of it, the design of it, the accessibility of it. And in parallel, like with all institutions, how do you keep them accountable and transparent? The whole process of the functioning. Do use of video conferencing exclude the open courts principle? The whole purpose of an open court was it is seen to be part of a society, right? By sharing links that are accessible only to a few, how much are you in compliant with that principle of open courts? Those are the aspects that will need all of us to engage with more seriously. Technology and analytics. Our book is called Technology and Analytics. I have not written the book. It's co-edited with Professor Nomesh Bolia, who is the head of the center at IIT Delhi. He's done a lot of work on operations research, optimization. So it is an area that needs to be brought into the courts, because efficiency of courts functioning is something that all of us know needs a lot of improvement. So those are techniques, those are methods that other sectors are very well aware of and need to be brought into the justice system. It was a fantastic journey. The book itself, some very, very good chapters are there in that particular volume. Technology is one, but many people are not aware of the analytics. We have consciously used the word analytics and not artificial intelligence, because, artificial intelligence term seems a bit of a conceited term. So some of the experts that we spoke with said you should use the word algorithms or analytics. And that is why we use the word analytics. It's a conscious decision, and I hope people will pick up the book to understand why we have titled it like that.
For one, I'm going to immediately bring it to my bookshelf for sure. I have to read it, because these are a couple of very few books written in India, especially keeping technology as the center and how law and other things work around it. So, given that fact, there have been so many approaches, like you talked about citizen-centric approach.
Yeah.
If that is kept in mind, then obviously legal system will have a different way of dealing with the transition and the approach that we take. Your background always has been in corporate sector, and you have an extensive experience in tax controversy management, which is in itself a very unique and niche field. How have these experiences shaped your views or your approach in addressing the whole citizen centric approach? Because this is something which is very different. A person who's from corporate background moves to an NGO background and thinks in that perspective. How have you done that transition? We would love to hear that.
I was fortunate that the leadership at DAKSH at that point found it appropriate to give me a chance to be here. But the thought process was seeded much earlier when I was in the corporate role, where we had to manage a lot of really complicated litigation. And you have these trackers and Excel sheets with case numbers and years and amounts under disputes and chances of failure or success and next date of hearing, what is the final outcome that you expect, all of those things. And you jump onto a call with large companies, you jump onto a call with the management, and then they will say, okay, when is this likely to end, this matter? And I understand why you have to take it there, but when is it likely to end? And then you realize, I don't really know when this is going to end, because that is the nature of the Indian justice system. And that made me think more about the courts and how they function and how they are difficult to understand for people who are not familiar with them. Fortunately, at that time, I was also doing a course at Takshashila on public policy, and the quantitative methods was one topic that I found very interesting. And I tried to apply those, and I wrote a few blogs around it using those methodologies. And very coincidentally, I happened to come across an op-ed in the Hindu by Sudhir Krishnaswamy, who is now the Vice Chancellor of NLS Bangalore. He had written an op-ed on the work of a researcher at Harvard who's pioneered work on Indian Supreme Court on using quantitative methods. And I found this very interesting. I said, yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. He says how distance from Delhi matters in appeal rates, etc. And I wrote a cold email to Professor Sudhir Krishnaswamy. I said, I am so-and-so. I read your op-ed. Very interesting. I have some ideas. Can I come and discuss? And surprisingly, he replied to that email and connected me to his team. And I went over and we shared ideas. One thing led to the other, and I was introduced to the team at DAKSH, Harish and Kishore, saying, they're also working very similarly on using quantitative methods to understand the functioning of the justice system. And I started volunteering with DAKSH. That was a very big eye-opener for me, and it helped me get a more systemic perspective of things. At that point, I was making up my mind on what to do next in my career, and I felt if something as big as Indian justice system is waiting to be talked about or researched or studied for the benefit of the nation, then no better time than now to do it. At that point, also, there was this Law Commission report by Justice A.P. Shah, the 245th Law Commission report. And for the first time, they had used numbers to understand extensively. And I said, why hasn't this been done before? If this is the first kind of such thing, then imagine what more can be done. And that made me make up my mind to move to this field on a whole-time basis. So this is my full-time job now. working on DAKSH projects.
Wow, sir, moving from corporate to serving the society is an absolute leap, and you have done it so flawlessly. Now, understanding these nitty gritties coming from a person who has achieved so much in life makes so much sense. So, keeping all that in mind, you also have worked a lot in advocacy and community building. How do you engage the stakeholders who are involved to drive them into meaningful changes that can be brought in the legal ecosystem in India as well as worldwide? Because India cannot only be seen in a jurisdictional format now that we are entering into a digital world,
Yeah.
and almost all of the tech related laws
Yeah.
are built on universal laws. So, how do you see the kind of changes that we are looking forward to, and how do you make sure that people understand these things as well?
It's not easy at all. You have to start with the expectation that there will be resistance, there will be pushback, because status quo is going to be disturbed. People will be pushed out of comfort zone. Existing means ways of working will be disrupted. Once we start the conversation with that expectation, then it becomes easier to navigate the next steps. The tools, I mean, it's wrong to call them tools. Really, it is a conviction. It is a communication of convictions. It is a communication of ideas and figuring out who is connecting with them on the other side. It's echoing in the society that you listen for. While we can do all the planning that you want, ultimately it is finding people who resonate with your way of thinking, your vision, who share your vision, who are able to understand that this is a path that needs to be tread by them, recognizing fellow travelers when you see them. So it is as much about yourself as it is about the others. There's a fantastic line that I sometimes fear using. There are people who claim to be doing advocacy, and then there are people who are doing advocacy. People who seem to be doing advocacy, sometimes in some cases, they are, I mean, I say advocacy, I don't mean advocates and lawyers, but those who are advocating for change in the system. So it's a very fine line to tread. And you have to be humble, you have to be understanding of the various perspectives and try to take as many as you can along the way, because it's very difficult to say that, I did this and therefore this happened. That linear equation is not at all possible. It does not happen in society, especially in the law and justice field, which is really one subsystem in the large complex adaptive system, which is the society. To say that one action led to another is a very, very tenuous argument. And it's possible. If you're lucky, it will happen. I can clearly say I have been fortunate to have been part of some of them, but it does not happen to everybody or every time to everybody. So, in that context, given the global upsurge on using technology across everything, India cannot be isolated from it. India will have to learn how to adapt to the situation. I think there is a great case for India taking the lead on many things, and people do recognize, many countries do recognize, and we have seen this with cases like UPI and DPI, that other countries are now waking up to the fact that there are newer ways of building things that can benefit the society at large. India should try and take the lead in many of these domains, and especially law and justice. I feel we have a huge opportunity, because the developments in other countries are not very encouraging from that overall social perspective.
I guess India is the front runner when it comes to AI and its usage in social upliftment. That's what I understand from the ethical perspective and the think tanks with whom I am involved. I would like to ask that question also, if you allow me to,
Yep.
that since we are front runners in terms of ethics, morality, spirituality, and we are trying to understand these concepts, and world is trying to understand it as well along with us, how do you see that this is going to take us as a country, as a legal framework? And how do you see the society is catching up to it? Because law, as always, has been told everywhere that it catches up with technology, but technology runs forward. Do you see any time sooner that we will be having the similar kind of laws, which will be much more enforceable, even without a lot of cap on it? because there are researches going on in order to understand how these things are going to take shape when it comes to, let's say, driverless cars. And given the kind of population that we have, will that become a reality anytime sooner for us, with obviously all the implications?
I would break that question into two parts. How does law catch up with technology? And more generally, how does law catch up, right? I think law that affects technology is something that we have not been very good at in India. We have been reactive, very reactive. And as you rightly pointed out, it is reactive in most countries, but possibly we could say we are laggards even in that ranking of countries that react. If I were to hazard a guess, I would say that where it would affect citizens more personally, we will have some laws very soon, right? Whether it is health or food. In fact, the BT cotton, you will recognize the pushback against that. So we should use the word technology more broadly. So there or environment, possibly in some cases, you will have a more direct pushback. But where it is a more one, two orders removed from individuals, you will possibly see a slower response to it. And that brings me to the next question on the laws itself being reactive to the social expectations. Social, you have norms, you have conventions, you have practices, and those will need to get converted into laws. I think that feedback loop itself is not very strong in India. It's either the government jumping the gun or some interest groups pushing for it. The general law making process has not yet settled down in our democracy. There are very little widespread consultations. There are no solid research reports that back the introduction of law. There is no study on impact of law. So to that extent, I feel the reason why I've made the first guess or my forecast is because it will affect individuals personally, and the election cycles will take care of that pushback. But where the others are concerned, we may see a slower pushback. It's not necessarily good or bad, but something that to be mindful of and think through as a society what processes and mechanisms we need to strengthen to meet the expectations of society.
Given all these understandings that we are talking about, how do you see the new generation of learners who are entering this legal field as well as technology field? Now, even technology law has become a reality in India as well. So, how do you see, or what would be your suggestions to the new learners or new entrants of law in order to have a plan, maybe, or a timeline sorted out for them? How should they approach, and what kind of plan should they keep in mind that our system is also changing, our movement is also taking place? How should they get acquainted with it? And we would love to hear your suggestions,
Yeah.
as in how do you see these new norms coming into picture and everyone getting acquainted with technology?
Actually, I would take this as a very good question. And we have kind of trying to think about a curriculum or a reading list on trying to bring lawyers. And I have felt that maybe it is better to start with where you are. Any person who is joining a law college now has already used mobile for the last 3 to 5 years. So start from that. What is the law governing WhatsApp? What is the law governing posts on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter? If I create a post on Instagram, what material can I use? What is the law governing that material? If I tag somebody and it is not a very nice tag, what are the consequences to me? I would urge lawyers, law students who are entering the course to start with those daily experiences and then build up. It will lead them to it. If they are curious, if they are keen and diligent, it will lead them to constitutional rights. It will lead them to institutional mechanisms. But starting with understanding, even maybe breaking down the machine of the mobile, I would not recommend textbooks or books, especially ours, for this purpose. Start with experiences, start with your daily transactions. You're doing Paytm transaction or a UPI transaction. What are the rights if it doesn't go through? If there is a dispute, what are the mechanisms? I think thinking through on those lines will be far more educative than coming up with a reading list of textbooks and research articles.
Practical view you are suggesting, which is subject to always question, that the way we are educated and the way we are trained in practical life are absolutely two different worlds. Because once we come out of college, we realize, okay, this is a new world which we have to learn from zero again. So you have obviously been always busy with something or the other and developing your career as well as developing the societal systems as well. Outside all this professional constraints or endeavors, what kind of personal hobbies or interests do you have? And how do you complement your life with your busy legal and corporate life as well?
So I have always made time for my interests, and I encourage everybody to spend time on something other than what they make a living from, something for themselves, something that nourishes the soul and the body. Super important to keep that priority straight. Physical activity is something that I have discovered recently. Maybe it's the age catching up. I've discovered recently the benefits of swimming, and I strongly encourage as many people as possible to take it up. But other than that, I am big on reading books. Sometimes it becomes fashionable to say reading books, but I read books that cannot be finished. And I mean that in the nice way, the classics that you can keep revisiting at any point of time. And I read a lot of classical Indian literature in Kannada, in Sanskrit, in English. I read a lot of our Indian traditional books, which I belong to. I find that very useful. And art, music is a big part of my life. All types of music, I'm open to all types of music, but I think clearly music plays a big part in my unwinding, shifting of mood, depending on how the day goes, all of it. I think it's an important element that people should keep them handy, have some music handy. You never know when you will need it.
Wow, so you are so humble at sharing these things as well. Keeping all this in mind, the kind of unwinding which lawyers usually end up, the new entrants with whom I have interacted, they're like, if you are saying that I get time for this and that, when will we do the earning? What suggestions to give? Many times I literally am speechless when I have to answer that you are privileged to get it. How should we do it? So, sir, given that fact, how do you suggest the new generation or next generation of legal professionals and researchers who are actually eager to make a meaningful impact in this particular field, but are restricted by many, many things? There can be a numerous number of things which may be restricting their growth or something. So, what do you suggest? How can they come up with maybe new ways of learning and approaching towards life and the career?
I think it's a very, very important point, something that I have also of late started thinking more. There is no straight answer. The lawyer's income is dependent on the domain that they work on. If that domain is doing well, then the clients will obviously be able to meet the needs of the lawyers, right? If you're doing work for high level transactions like corporate M&A, you will obviously get paid more. If you're doing work that is not relevant for some other deal, it's a function of the section of the society and the economy that you're servicing. It's important to keep that in mind before you choose what to get into. That the fees that you will earn, if you're going to be doing, again, traditional advisory work, is going to be a function of the section of the economy that you are going to be servicing. And those will also have business cycles. So what was very attractive 2 decades back may not be so attractive now. So therefore, I would say I do feel honestly that there is an oversupply of law graduates into the society. They are very bright people and very good skills. Try and figure out what could be a skill adjacent that you can build on top of your legal skills. Your writing skills can be used in many roles. Thinking through logically can be used in many situations, or being able to craft arguments and respond to situations that challenge your positions can be used in many situations. So be open to be using, recognize that these are skills that you have learned from a domain, but try and see if they can be transferred to other domains. I would strongly recommend being open to that, because I've seen some legally trained people do very well in other sectors. And then you see, oh, okay, this is where they got it from. So, constitution as a subject, just take constitution as a subject. You have the advantage many in the country do not have. You have how the country functions as an institution. You can choose to go deeper into it. You have a bird's eye view. So it's given you a skill to look at a system at a bird's eye perspective. Where else can you apply that skill? So try and see how your skills can be transferred to other domains. I don't claim to have answered to your question completely, but I can tell you with honesty that it's something that I would advise my child also. If he were to say, yeah, I'm choosing to do law, then I would say, okay, view this as a means to learn how to learn and not say, okay, I want to do law for the rest of my life. Great. If that happens, well and good. But be open to the fact that you have learned how to learn something and apply that to a situation that you may be exposed to later on, and being open to grow in that as well.
Wow, sir. You answered the question as well as did not answer the question in your own words. But yes, the suggestion is absolutely fascinating that one should choose wisely. Sir, looking ahead, I will not take much of your time, but we would like to understand, what do you see as the most pressing challenges or the opportunities in terms of India's journey towards a more equitable or efficient judicial system? And how do you plan to address them with your involvement with so many big organizations and big names in India itself?
I think there is no doubt in my mind that it's only people coming together that can make a difference. So the path ahead for all of us is to identify, connect with a purpose larger than ourselves. We have reached a state as a nation and as a society, our basic requirements are to some extent or to a large extent fulfilled for many in the society. So, as lawyers, I think it is important that you identify a purpose which is more than yourself and try and be a part of achieving that purpose, whether it is particular rights, whether it is making courts more accessible, making laws more accessible, whether it is making people aware of what they can do as a next course of action, legal aid lawyers, etc. So try and figure out what you could help with. And this is a mindset that will help even in corporate situations. It is for some business purpose that a legal opinion is being sought. Unless you have keep that in mind, your legal advice will remain as a very pedantic exercise. So identifying the larger purpose and connecting with it is very important for the future generation. I mean, for everybody. And I would strongly recommend that you try and identify a group of people who feel similarly and be part of that. Develop your own community, identify communities. At DAKSH, we are also working on many interesting projects, and we look forward to connecting with others who feel similarly about these projects, whether as professionals, whether as young professionals or students. There is much to be done collectively. The journey has only barely begun, and we have a bunch of ideas on what could be done, and happy to share that with people who are interested.
Thank you so much, sir, for your humble interview and absolutely humble invitation for us to get connected and build a community of our own in order to understand how we can serve the society better. And once again, thanks a lot. And thank you for listening to us. I'm your host, Divya Dwivedi, and thank you, Surya Prakash, sir, for being here and giving us so much time.
Thank you so much, ma'am.